First of all, I want to extend my gratitude to Nectaria and her team for an amazing job that she's doing, and also for the fact that it's the 30th anniversary of this fantastic event that has already created a community in spirit and a community of interests together. I will try to take from the image that Tom has already described, and which starts 24 centuries ago. In this city, a man with no wealth, no army, and no institution behind him sat in the shade of an olive grove with a handful of people who had the great luxury of time. It was here Socrates that walked the agora, asking questions that made comfortable people deeply uncomfortable. And in doing so, he taught an entire civilization that the examined life was the only one worth living. Slowly, painstakingly, he taught them to think, and I believe this image is absolutely beautiful. He changed the course of thought, armed with only one question. He left behind no textbook, but he did leave behind a method, and that method outlived many empires that were formed ever since. Actually, you can see that man, Socrates. He's behind me, and he's he's wearing a green robe. And as always, we see him caught in earnest debate. Socrates believed education wasn't about filling minds with answers, but training them to ask better questions. And Plato's academy aimed to educate people who could be trusted with power, not because they had the right answers, but because they knew how to ask the right questions. We are meeting today because that idea is under pressure, not from hostility, but from a technology that it is so rapidly reshaping what it means to learn. The most powerful educational tool in history is being deployed at scale without a clear conception of what kind of minds it is meant to produce. And this is my first point. Are we producing minds that are passive receivers of information, or minds that exercise critical reasoning? The problem is that we've raised a generation conditioned for immediate gratification, and a culture that largely encouraged it. So here's the question. How do we prevent generative AI from making us cognitively lazy? How can we prevent the quiet collapse of critical thinking? How do we use it to enhance minds rather than diminish them? 4 points I want to make before I try to answer that. First, credit where it's due. Tom's company put a potential tutor in the pocket of any 15-year-old anywhere, which no local school is able to match. That's genuinely historic. What follows isn't a critique of what OpenAI built. It's a question about what it should build next. Second, access to information, of course, is not the same thing as wisdom. Socrates called himself a midwife to thought. He delivered questions, not answers, forcing people into aporia, a state of productive perplexity. ChatGPT does the opposite. A frictionless oracle that resolves uncertainty instantly with zero effort. Remove the friction, and you quietly remove the thing that built minds capable of governing, innovating, and leading. That's not a flaw in the product. It's the product working exactly as it was designed, optimized for satisfaction over struggle. A product tuned for effortless engagement rather than deep deliberation. The question is whether as designed is what education actually needs, Is it what humanity actually needs? Third, very quickly, an evidence on our side. We are an enterprise customer of this technology. Not a critic. At our RCI Holding, when our teams leaned on AI for conclusions, they became fluent, but brittle. They couldn't defend their own reasoning under pressure. The fix wasn't less AI. It was redirecting it. Instead of asking for answers, we asked it to attack our conclusions. Find every weak assumption, every line a hostile counterpart would exploit. Used that way, AI becomes a tireless sparring partner. Teams that adopted that posture got sharper. Teams that didn't became slaves of insight they never actually owned. Fourth and last point I want to end it, here's a pitch to Tom. The classical Socratic method never scaled. One philosopher, one student for long hours. Nobody can afford that model and human tutor to one human student. But AI may be the first technology in history that can put a Socratic teacher beside every student, simultaneously at zero marginal cost. Imagine a system that doesn't answer your question on contact. It asks what you already believe, surfaces the contradiction in your no reasoning, and waits. A Socratic AI can sustain the same rigorous, patient dialogue with tens of millions of students at once, in every language, and never grew impatient, never make struggling students feel small for not yet understanding. That last part matters more than it sounds. In a classroom, confusion has a social cost. The student who says, "I don't understand," in front of 30 peers, is taking a real risk. So most stop taking it. Most of us here will have suffered that feeling to some small degree. But few of us, I doubt, are young enough to have experienced, as our children do, the fear of a moment of revealed ignorance going viral. They learn to perform understanding instead of achieving it in reality. They copy the method without grasping the principle. An AI tutor removes that cost entirely. A student can be as confused, as wrong, as slow as they actually are, with no audience and no judgment, which means the productive confusion Socrates depended on becomes available to exactly the students who currently avoid it most. That's what I mean by scaling Socrates. Not a tool that hands out information on demand, but one that recreates for every student everywhere, a patient interlocutor who believes they are capable of finding the answer themselves and simply won't let them stop thinking until they do. It's buildable today, and in my closing remarks, I will provide to you the example on which I have been working.